John was in his home office on a typical cold Boston night when he heard the voice of Sarah, his wife, coming from the next room. Intrigued, he approached and put his ear to the half-open door. His heart skipped a beat when he heard her words, filled with excitement and guilt. Yes, it was incredible. I've never felt so alive. Betrayal was the best thing I've ever done. Those words echoed in John's mind, over and over again, like a relentless hammer. Every detail of her confession cut into his soul, and the coldness with which Sarah spoke made him feel a deep chill. He walked away silently, feeling a mix of pain and fury. His thoughts became cloudy, but one decision emerged clear: revenge. It would not be impulsive or uncontrolled, it would be calculated, cold and devastating. He knew he couldn't confront her directly. I needed to plan each step, each movement, with the precision of a surgeon. And so, that night, John hatched the beginning of a meticulous plan to give back the pain he felt, multiplied 1,000-fold. John Harris was a 35-year-old man, a respected software engineer in Boston. He worked at a renowned technology company, where his dedication and talent were admired by everyone. John was known for his calm, patience and sharp mind. His life, however, seemed to follow a meticulous, almost monotonous routine, until the moment everything fell apart. Sarah, his wife, was a delightful 32-year-old woman with a vibrant personality and natural charm that attracted everyone around her. She worked as an interior decorator, a job that allowed her to express her creativity and interact with a variety of interesting people. John and Sarah had a seemingly perfect marriage. They met in college and built a life together that many envied. They lived in a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood in Boston, a haven of peace where they raised their son, Michael, a smart 8-year-old boy, full of energy and curiosity. Boston, with its historic streets and intellectual atmosphere, formed the ideal setting for their lives. The city, with its tree-lined parks, Charles River, and rich cultural scene, offered a quality of life that they both appreciated. Weekends often included walks on Boston Common, visits to the Museum of Fine Arts, and dinners at harborside restaurants. John especially enjoyed Sunday mornings, when he would go for a run along the river, clearing his mind and recharging his energy for the week ahead. However, over the past few months, John had noticed a subtle change in Sarah's behavior. She was more distant, often absorbed in her thoughts or lost in messages on her cell phone. There were nights when she worked late, saying she was busy with important projects. John, in his trusting nature, suspected nothing other than the tiredness and stress of work. Until that fateful night. After hearing Sarah's shocking confession on the phone, John retreated to his office, where he spent the rest of the night in a whirlwind of emotions. Every detail of what she had said was etched in his mind. He couldn't believe that the woman with whom he had shared so many moments was betraying his trust so blatantly. Dawn brought a new perspective. John realized he needed to maintain the facade, act as if nothing had changed, while he devised his plan for revenge. He knew he needed to be meticulous, careful not to arouse suspicion. So, he began to study Sarah's habits, the people she met, the places she frequented. Sarah, on the other hand, was oblivious to the fact that her husband knew about the betrayal. She continued with her routine, interspersing moments of affection with John and Michael with her secret meetings. His confidence in the discretion of his actions was complete. Sarah believed she had everything under control, that her double life was a well-kept secret. Meanwhile, John began to put his plan into action. He began to get closer to his coworkers, seeking to learn skills that could be useful in his work. He knew he needed to be smart and strategic. Revenge would not just be an impulsive act, but rather a sequence of calculated moves that would destroy Sarah's life as she had done to his. Boston, with its bustling streets and dynamic environment, became a stage for John's quiet preparation. He found new energy in his morning workouts, where he planned every step of his retaliation. The Charles River, which once represented a haven of peace, now symbolized his determination and focus. Each race made him more determined and prepared for what was to come. At home, John maintained the facade of a loving husband and devoted father. His interactions with Michael were genuine, a safe haven amid the chaos unfolding in his mind. He knew he needed to protect his son from the consequences of his actions, ensuring Michael continued to feel the love and security he always had. Little by little, John began to test small actions, observing Sarah's reactions. He became more attentive to details, mentally noting each response, each change in behavior. The pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place, revealing a clear picture of what needed to be done. His coldness and precision were frightening, but necessary for the success of his plan. So the routine in Boston continued. For everyone around, the Harisa's lives continued as normal, but John knew that a storm was brewing. His patience and determination were unwavering. He waited for the right moment to act, knowing that when the time came, his revenge would be as devastating as the impact of Sarah's betrayal. John became, day by day, a master in the art of dissimulation. His internal pain fueled his external strength. And while Sarah continued her carefree life, oblivious to the impending storm, John advanced, step by step, toward his meticulous retaliation. The following days were a dance of subtleties and strategies. John, now a man with a dark agenda, watched Sarah's every move with surgical precision. He knew he couldn't rush it, he needed to wait for the right moments for each stage of his plan. The first phase involved collecting evidence and creating opportunities to destabilize Sarah without her realizing it. John began to discreetly track Sarah's steps, uncovering the details of her secret encounters. He discreetly installed spy software on her cell phone, gaining access to her messages and calls. Each new discovery fueled his anger and strengthened his resolve. Sarah, unaware that she was being monitored, continued to see her lover, a man called David, who worked at a design firm in the city. John's first concrete action was subtle but effective. He created a fake social media account and began sending anonymous messages to Sarah, insinuating that they knew about her affair. The messages were careful, planting seeds of doubt and fear. Sarah initially thought it was just a mistake, but as the messages continued, her anxiety grew. John watched the changes in Sarah coldly. She became more cautious, constantly looking over her shoulder and checking her cell phone every few moments. He knew that fear was a powerful weapon and that he needed to keep the pressure on. At home, he maintained a facade of normalcy, but his eyes captured every detail of her uneasiness. The next phase of the plan involved a more direct approach. John hired a private detective to follow David. The photos and information collected were a treasure trove of ammunition. John waited for the right moment to confront Sarah, knowing the impact would be devastating. During a quiet dinner, he casually mentioned David's name, noting Sarah's immediate reaction. She turned pale, dropping the glass she was holding. John feigned concern, but inside, he felt cold satisfaction. As the weeks passed, John began to build pressure. He fabricated evidence that David was involved in illicit activities, ensuring that Sarah would encounter these accidents at home. Suspicious documents left in her car, compromising emails accidentally opened on the family computer. Sarah began to move away from David, fear taking over her actions. John watched, unseen, like a conductor conducting a symphony of destruction. Michael, oblivious to the storm brewing around him, continued to be the focus of John's dedication. Every smile and hug from his son served as a reminder of what was at stake. He knew his revenge couldn't put Michael in danger. Thus, every move was calculated to ensure that her son continued to live in a safe and loving world. The third phase of John's plan involved a public exhibition. He organized a social event at his home, inviting friends and coworkers. During the party, John discreetly planted clues that would lead Sarah to uncover and expose of his infidelities. Compromising photographs and printed messages were strategically hidden in places she would inevitably find. The night of the party was a game of nerves. John watched Sarah move through the event with a mixture of anxiety and suspicion. When she finally found the evidence, her face turned into a mask of terror. She quickly retreated upstairs, and John followed her, finding her shivering in the bedroom. "Sarah, what's going on?" he asked, his voice filled with false concern. She stammered out excuses and denials, but John interrupted her, laying the evidence before her. "You betrayed me. Now, let's see how you deal with the consequences." Sarah broke down in tears, begging for forgiveness, but John was undeterred. He walked away, leaving her alone to face humiliation and despair. He descended the stairs with cool calm, resuming his role as host, while Sarah remained hidden, her mind spinning in a whirlwind of fear and guilt. John knew the public humiliation was just the beginning. He needed to destroy Sarah's trust, make her feel the depth of the betrayal he had caused. In the following days, he intensified his campaign, anonymously sending the evidence to Sarah's friends and family, ensuring her social circle knew the truth. The tension in the house was rising, but John maintained the facade. He knew he was close to the climax, the moment when everything would culminate in a final retribution. Every step he took brought him closer to the completion of his meticulous plan. And so, with the city of Boston as silent witness, John advanced, step by step, toward the climax of his revenge. With each day, with each move, he prepared for the final blow, the moment when Sarah would face the full magnitude of her betrayal and the coldness of her retribution. John knew the moment of final revelation was near. His patience and meticulousness had gotten him to this point, and now it was time to reap the rewards of his careful planning. He decided that the conclusion of his plan would take place at a family event, a dinner celebrating Michael's birthday. Everyone would be there, close friends, family and, of course, Sarah and David. The day of dinner arrived. The house was impeccably decorated, and John made a point of being the perfect host. He greeted guests with a warm smile, while Sarah, visibly nervous, tried to keep up appearances. Michael, oblivious to the underlying tension, was beaming with joy, excited by the party and the gifts. The night wore on, and John waited for the right moment to begin the climax of his plan. He knew he needed to choose the perfect moment to ensure the impact was devastating. During dinner, he made a warm toast, thanking everyone for coming and celebrating the family. The guests applauded, raising their glasses, oblivious to what was about to happen. John waited until the guests began to relax, their attention divided between conversation and dessert. It was then that he stood up again, catching everyone's attention. "I'd like to share something very special with you tonight," he began, his voice calm and collected. "It's a surprise I've been preparing for some time." He turned on a projector he had discreetly installed in the room. The lights went out, and the screen lit up with a series of images. At first, they were family photos, happy moments, trips, previous parties. The guests smiled, commenting among themselves on the memories displayed. But then, the images changed. Photos of Sarah with David began to appear, compromising and incriminating. Whispers of shock and murmurs of disapproval filled the room. Sarah was petrified, her face pale and her hands shaking. John continued, undeterred. "For those who don't know, David is more than a family friend. He has been intimate with my wife." John's voice was sharp, each word carrying a coldness that silenced the room. Sarah tried to speak, but the words failed her. She was trapped, exposed in front of everyone who mattered in her life. David, who was also present, tried to get up, but John stopped him. "Sit down, David. I don't think we're done yet." The authority in John's voice was unquestionable. David, his face contorted with shame and anger, obeyed. John then revealed the climax of his revenge. "Sarah, you thought you could betray me with impunity, destroy our family without consequences. But today, in front of everyone, I want you to feel the same humiliation you made me feel." He approached Sarah, looking her straight in the eyes. "I know everything. Every detail, every encounter. And now, everyone here knows too." The silence in the room was oppressive. Sarah, in tears, begged for forgiveness. John, please, I didn't want it to be like this. I was wrong, I know, but please, think about Michael, think about us. John interrupted her, relentlessly. Thinking about Michael? I've always thought about him. He's the reason I kept this all a secret until now. But you didn't think about him when you decided to betray our family. He turned to the guests. Now everyone knows who Sarah really is. A woman who didn't value the family she had. The guests were in shock, some trying to comfort Sarah, while others looked at John with a mixture of pity and understanding. Michael, confused and scared, didn't fully understand what was happening, but he felt the weight of tension in the air. John, seeing the impact his words and actions had made, decided to take it a step further. As of today, Sarah, our life together ends here. I have already started the divorce process, and I will fight for custody of Michael. You will have to deal with the consequences of your actions alone. The silence was broken only by the sound of Sarah's sobs. The party, which had begun as a celebration of joy, now turned into a scene of pain and regret. John, feeling he had achieved his goal, retreated from the room, leaving Sarah to face the judgment of her friends and family. John took refuge in his office, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Although his revenge was complete, he knew the emotional scars would remain. Her mind kept returning to Michael, whose innocence was now compromised by the raw reality of events. As he sat in silence, reflecting on everything that had happened, he heard a knock on the door. It was Michael, his eyes red from crying. "Daddy, why did you do that? What's happening to Mommy?" John took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. "Michael, I wanted to protect you and be honest. Mom did something very wrong and hurt our family. I had to do something to make sure it didn't happen again." Michael hugged his father, seeking comfort in the knowledge that, despite everything, he still had a safe home. John hugged him back, promising himself that he would do everything in his power to ensure Michael was protected from the collateral damage of Sarah's betrayal. The following days were a mix of chaos and routine. News of the scandal spread quickly, and Sarah found herself isolated, dealing with the repercussions of her actions. John, on the other hand, focused on creating a stable environment for Michael while moving forward with the divorce proceedings. During this time, John also faced his own emotions. Revenge had brought a temporary sense of justice, but he knew he still had a long way to go to rebuild his life. He dedicated himself to his work, finding an outlet in programming and the projects that were once his passion. One night, while Michael was at his grandparents' house, John decided to confront Sarah one last time. He needed to understand what had led to the betrayal and perhaps find a sense of closure to move on. He found her in the kitchen, where she was sitting, lost in thought. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, his tone calmer than he expected. She nodded, knowing this conversation was inevitable. "I want to understand why. What made you do this?" Sarah looked at him, her eyes full of sadness and regret. "John, I have no excuses for what I did. I felt lost, dissatisfied with my life, and I looked for the wrong way out. David was an escape, a terrible mistake. I never wanted to hurt you or Michael, but I ended up doing just that." John listened in silence, feeling a mixture of anger and compassion. "What now? What are you going to do?" he asked, knowing that her answers wouldn't change the facts, but perhaps they would bring some clarity. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I'm going to try to rebuild myself, find a way to be a better mother to Michael, even if we can't be a family anymore." John nodded, knowing that despite everything, Michael needed both parents. "I'm going to fight for custody of Michael, but I want him to have you in his life. We need to be adults about this, for his sake." Sarah agreed, tears flowing freely now. "I know, John. I know. And I will do whatever it takes to make up for what I've done, even if it's never enough." The conversation brought a sense of closure to John. He knew he could never forget what Sarah had done, but he also understood that revenge could only take so far. The real challenge would be rebuilding his life and ensuring that Michael grew up in an environment of love and stability. With the decision to move on, John began planning a future that, although different from what he had imagined, could be just as meaningful. He committed himself to being the best father he could be, to protecting Michael, and to teaching him the importance of honesty and forgiveness, even in the midst of pain. The night of revelation had been just the beginning of the healing process. John knew it would take time, but he was willing to face each challenge with the same determination he had shown when carrying out his revenge. And so, life moved on, with the promise of better days as each person found their path to redemption and peace. The days following the final confrontation between John and Sarah brought a new dynamic to the house. John, now focused on providing a stable environment for Michael, dedicated himself to creating a routine that brought a sense of normalcy. Mornings began to be filled with little father-son rituals, breakfast together, taking Michael to school, and nights of bedtime stories. Every moment shared was a step towards rebuilding the trust and security Michael needed. Sarah, in turn, had moved into a small apartment not far away. Despite the physical separation, they both agreed that it was vital to keep communication open for Michael's sake. She visited frequently, trying to show that, despite the mistakes she made, her love for her son remained unshakable. These visits, although tense at first, began to become more natural as time went on. John, meanwhile, continued to deal with his own emotions. The feeling of revenge accomplished brought temporary relief, but he knew he needed to face the emotional scars left by betrayal. He returned to therapy, something he had abandoned after the crisis began. The sessions helped him process his pain and understand that in order to move forward, he needed to find a way to forgive, not for Sarah, but for himself. At work, John threw himself headlong into new projects. His performance caught the attention of his superiors, who considered him for a promotion. Accepting the new challenge meant more responsibilities, but also an opportunity to redirect her energies towards something productive. He accepted, seeing it as a chance to rebuild his professional life with the same determination he applied to his personal life. Weekends have become a haven of normalcy and reconstruction. John and Michael explored Boston, visiting museums, playing ball in the park, and sharing simple moments that strengthened their bond. During one of these escapades, while strolling through Boston Common, Michael asked his father if his mother would one day return to live with them. John paused, thinking carefully before answering. "Michael, Mom and I have made some mistakes and for now we need to live apart. But that doesn't mean we love you any less. We're working to find a way to be a family, even if it's different than it was before." Michael seemed to accept the answer, holding his father's hand tightly. "I just want everyone to be happy," he said, with the simple, direct wisdom of a child. John smiled, feeling a surge of pride and sadness at the same time. He knew the road to happiness would be long and full of challenges, but he was determined to walk that path for Michael. As the weeks turned into months, life began to find a new rhythm. Sarah, after the public humiliation, also sought professional help. She enrolled in a counseling and therapy program, hoping to understand and correct the mistakes she had made. Her encounters with John, now more frequent due to her visits to Michael, became less tense. Both began to find a way to coexist for the sake of their son, even if the wound of betrayal was still present. During a meeting at Michael's school, John and Sarah sat side by side, discussing their son's academic and social progress. The school counselor, who was unaware of the recent turmoil in their lives, commented on the positive impact of both parents on Michael's life. "It's rare to see separated parents working so well together for their child's well-being," she said, with a smile. John and Sarah exchanged a look, silently acknowledging that, despite everything, they were managing to do something right. John began to realize that revenge, although initially satisfying, was not the answer to all the pain he felt. He needed to find a balance between justice and inner peace. Continuing to hate Sarah would only perpetuate the pain and prevent her own healing. This understanding brought a new perspective on what it meant to move forward. As spring arrived in Boston, bringing with it the promise of renewal, John found himself more hopeful about the future. He began to consider the possibility of finding a new love, someone who could share his values and outlook on life. Although it was still early, the idea of starting over no longer seemed so impossible. One day, while walking along the Charles River with Michael, John felt a sense of tranquility he hadn't experienced in a long time. The water reflected the afternoon sun, creating a scene of peace and renewal. He looked at his son, who was running ahead, and felt a renewed determination to build a better future for both of them. The challenges would still exist, and the pain of betrayal would never be completely forgotten. However, John was ready to embrace the healing process and move forward, knowing that his love and dedication to Michael were his highest priority. And so, life continued, with John, Sarah and Michael navigating the complexities of a new reality. Each day brought new challenges and small victories, but together, in an unexpected way, they were finding a path to peace and redemption. As the months passed, the Harisa's lives seemed to be finding a new balance. John, Sarah and Michael adapted to the new dynamics, trying, each in their own way, to rebuild their lives. However, fate still had one last twist in store for this story. John, now promoted to head of projects, was immersed in an ambitious new project that demanded his skills and focus. The additional responsibilities, although challenging, offered an escape from the emotional turmoil that still persisted. John kept busy, but in quiet moments, he reflected on the need to move forward and allow life to bring him new opportunities. Sarah, on the other hand, was in a deep process of self-reflection. Therapy sessions had revealed old wounds and destructive behaviors that she needed to address. Determined to become a better person, she focused on Michael's well-being and finding a more meaningful purpose. Sarah began to get involved in volunteer work, helping women in situations similar to hers, trying to turn their pain into something positive. One day, during a sunny afternoon in the park, Sarah saw John talking to a woman. The sight made his heart sink. It was inevitable that they would both move on, but seeing it in action was a reality check. As Sarah approached, she realized that the woman was John's coworker, a lawyer named Emily, who had recently gotten divorced. The interactions between John and Emily were natural and filled with a new energy that he hadn't felt in a long time. Michael, growing up quickly, continued to be the glue that held the family together. His curiosity and intelligence flourished, and he excelled at school, winning prizes and praise from his teachers. The relationship between him and his parents was strong, but Michael felt the changes around him. One night, he asked his father if they could ever go back to being a family like before. John, with a heavy heart, explained that sometimes life took different directions, but that his love for him would never change. The final turning point came one winter night. John was in an important meeting when he received an urgent call. Sarah had been involved in a car accident while returning from a therapy session. The news was a shock that sent him running to the hospital, where he found Michael in tears in the waiting room. Doctors reported that Sarah was in critical condition. The collision had caused serious internal injuries and the possibility of survival was uncertain. John, holding Michael's hand, walked into the emergency room to see Sarah. She was hooked up to machines, fighting for her life. "Sarah," John said, his voice breaking. "We're here. Me and Michael. Hang in there." Sarah, her eyes half open, struggled to speak. "John. I'm sorry. I never wanted this. Take care of Michael. He's our greatest treasure." John felt a wave of conflicting emotions. All the anger and revenge that had dominated his thoughts for the past few months now seemed insignificant in the face of the fragility of life. He squeezed Sarah's hand, feeling a silent reconciliation. Minutes later, Sarah lost consciousness and succumbed to her injuries. Sarah's funeral was a time of pain and reflection for everyone. John, with Michael by his side, promised to honor her memory by being the best father he could be. Sarah's death brought a new perspective on life and what really mattered. After grieving, John found solace in Emily's presence. Both had experienced personal trauma and, together, began to build a new life. Emily brought a sense of peace and renewal that John hadn't experienced in years. Michael, although still dealing with the loss of his mother, found in Emily a supportive figure he respected and admired. Life continued, marked by the scars of the past, but also by the hopes of the future. John and Emily decided to get married in a simple ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family. Michael, now a teenager, held the rings, symbolizing the union of a new family. John, as he looked to the future, knew that the journey of revenge and pain was over. Life wouldn't be perfect, but he was willing to accept imperfections and seek happiness wherever it could be found. So, with a lighter heart and renewed determination, he moved forward, ready to face any challenge that fate might bring.